Watch me sculpt a complete Goblin chieftain. In this video I show you every step that I made in time-lapse to sculpt this miniature out of a mix between greenstuff and milliput. The armature is made of a paperclip wire, and you find the tutorial video for it in the description. Now enjoy the video, and don't forget to subscribe, to like and to leave a comment. Here you can see the finished miniature. Now watch me sculpt it from the beginning to the end. I start with sculpting the legs and the feet. First I apply the greenstuff milliput mix directly to the armature with my fingers. Afterwards I use my Zal and Bill dentist tools to get the rough shape onto the armature. Once this step is done I will add some putty to build up the anatomy of the miniature and to create the clothes. For building the anatomy of the legs I take some small pieces of putty and sculpt it directly onto the first layer. Again I use my dentist tools to get the surface flat. Now it's time for the clothes. For the pants I add more putty and sculpt the foldings of the garment and the kneecaps. The feet should be wrapped in some cloth, so I use my Zal tool to cut in the single stripes. body is finished. Next up I will sculpt the belt, the skirt, the belly and some accessories. Here we go again. First applying the fresh putty to the miniature and giving it a rough shape of the structure. Later I will work out the details with my sculpting tools. I call this step also blocking in. Sculpting a belt is always a little tricky. First I roll a thin snake out of the putty and wrap it around the waist. This works best when the layer underneath isn't totally cured yet. After it stays in place, I use my sculpting tools to get it in shape, and later I add the belt buckle with the small pieces of putty. Since his belly wasn't fat enough, I add some more putty to the body. Also I add some details like the belly button, a band-aid or a pimple. Here I add a bag to his belt. First I roll a small ball of putty and press it onto the belt. Afterwards I make a smaller one and put it on top. I use my ball-headed tool and my zal to bring everything in the right shape and to press in the wrinkles. can see the finished lower body. In the next steps I will sculpt the upper body, a ripped chainmail and the head. For the upper body I add some putty to the armature and blend the edges to the lower body with my sculpting tools. Later I add a ball of putty directly to the upper body to use it as a base structure for the head. After everything is in place and has the right shape, I add a nose and some facial details to the ball, which will be later the head. But why am I doing this step? Later I will add more putty and rework it completely so it's not necessary. But for me it's some kind of sculpting indication where everything has to be in the end. And that's why I'm doing this. A little crazy, I know. Now the upper body is done. Well, almost, since I will add some chainmail to it in the next step. For the chainmail I add a thin layer of putty as an understructure. I use some silicone shapers to get it smooth. Once this step is done, I start using my needle-like dentist tool and start with C-shaped rows from left to right and backwards from right to left, but now a row on top the first one. I repeat this step until the complete chainmail is done. Afterwards I rework the pattern with my needle tool. add more putty to the shoulders of the miniature because I found out that I made the chainmail a little short. I blend the new layers together with my sculpting tools and repeat with my C-shaped pattern like I did before. Now the chainmail is done. It's not perfect, but since this goblin wears a battle-worn and rigged chainmail, it fits very well. Now I can start sculpting the head and the face. For the face I add putty over the first head structure and blend it together. I build the face with adding small pieces of putty to the understructure. One after another I add more face anatomy. For the eyes I use some small putty balls which I prepared before from some leftover putty and push them into the eye sockets. The nose will be added and the nostrils will be pushed in with my ball-headed sculpting tool. Here I add the ears with small pieces of putty and work them onto the head. I cut in the details of the oracle with my sculpting tools. Now the face is finished. I really like the expression on his face. Next up I will add some ornaments and horns to his helmet. For the armature of the horns I drilled some small bended copper wire pieces in the head. Now I can sculpt the helmet by adding the first layer of putty to it. To get the horns into the right shape, I will use my silicone shapers. The skull on his helmet is sculpted in the same way as the face before. For the rivets that connect the horns to the helm I use a mechanical pencil and stamp the tip gently into the putty. is finished. Now we are getting closer to finish this miniature. Only the arms, his weapon, and his cloak are still missing at the moment. Starting with the left arm. The armature is a copper wire drilled into the body. First I bring on a base layer of putty and later I add the anatomy step by step. The hand is a little ball of putty folded around the wire and sculpted into the right shape. The thumb is a thin putty sausage added later. hand wasn't big enough, so I add some more putty to it. I use various sculpting tools to blend the putty layers together and to build up the knuckles and fingers. Also I add a bracelet to the left wrist. can see the finished left arm. A shield can later be added to the knuckles of the fist. Now we keep on sculpting the other arm and his weapon. Basically, we are doing the same here as with the left arm before. The armature wire is bended into a hook to serve later as the armature for his weapon. First we apply a basic layer of putty and later we add the anatomy of the arm and the hand. Gets another bracelet to the right wrist. Therefore we roll a thin putty sausage and sculpt it around the arm. Later we will take some tiny and cured putty balls to pinch them into the bracelet as small rivets. Here you see the finished right arm. The ring on his finger is made with the same technique as his bracelet. Now I can start sculpting his weapon. Since this goblin will get an axe, I take some putty to build up the rough shape of the axe blade. I will sand and file everything into the right shape once the putty is completely cured. The axe handle is just a thin layer of putty around the wire with some wood structure sculpted into. Basically, some straight and wave-shaped lines cut into the putty creates the wood texture. Here I add a little spike to the axe head. The spike is like the cured putty balls for the rivets, a tiny cured piece of rolled putty. It gets pinched into the axe head and worked into the putty with my sculpting tools. For the rivets that connects the axe blade with the handle, I use again my mechanical pencil. I simply stamp the tip of it into the putty of the axe blade. Here you can see the finished axe. After everything is cured, I will sand and file the axe blade into a much cleaner and sharper shape. Now only his cloak is missing. The base structure of the cloak is a flat rolled piece of putty that will be pushed onto the back of the miniature. The texture will be pinched into the cloak using a needle-like tool and Mizal wax carver. There was a little empty space left between his neck and the cloak, so I decided to add some putty there and sculpt the backside of the chainmail. Therefore I used the same chainmail technique as before. And now the miniature is completely finished. If you have any questions depending my sculpting steps or else just feel free to put it in the comments below and I will answer them as soon as possible. Thanks for watching and don't forget to like this video and to subscribe to my channel.